Welcome to Wild Survival. In this episode, a remarkable young woman named Juliane Koepcke survives an incredible plane crash from one of the worst lightning strikes in aviation history. With extraordinary resilience, at only 17 years old, she endured 11 harrowing days alone in the Peruvian Amazon rainforest. Listen closely to find out how Juliane used her knowledge of the jungle to persevere despite her desperate situation. Juliane Koepcke is the only child of German zoologists Maria and Hans Wilhelm Koepcke. She was born on the coast of Peru in Lima, where her parents worked at the Museum of Natural History. When she was 14, the family moved deep into the Amazon to establish a research station in Panguana. Here she was homeschooled and taught knowledge about the rainforest. Juliane thrived in the jungle and was close to her parents. She developed survival skills and conducted research with them on the abundant fauna found in the Amazon. Peru is located on the coast of South America and contains about 13% of the Amazon rainforest. The vast jungle covers nearly 60% of the entire country and has over 12,000 species that thrive there. Peru holds more than half of South America's population of birds, with an impressive 18% of the world's avifauna. The rich biodiversity makes Peru one of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet. At 17, Juliane was required by the state to return to Lima to complete her high school education. Her mother joined her, and they stayed there until her graduation and prom on December 23, 1971. They planned to fly back to her father at the research station in Panguana the next day to celebrate the holidays. They were eager to be reunited as a family and to be able to continue their lives together, uncovering the secrets of the Amazon jungle. Due to the holidays, flights were scarce. The ever-changing weather was causing delays and cancellations for all of the airlines. Juliana's parents were nervous about booking this flight due to the airline's poor reputation, but LANSA Flight 508 was the only one available on Christmas Eve. It had almost been canceled, but the passengers cheered when they were told that they were cleared for takeoff. But December was the start of the wet season in the Amazon, where rainfall is heavy and frequent. It is common for thunderstorms to consume the skies at a moment's notice. LANSA Flight 508 departed just before noon on December 24, 1971. The takeoff was uneventful as the plane headed for Pucallpa. Juliana sat next to her mother, taking the window seat. A man sat in the aisle seat and fell asleep as soon as the plane took off. They settled in for what they assumed would be a short, easy flight home. But soon, the plane became engulfed in dark clouds. Turbulence took over, violently shaking the aircraft and everyone inside. Luggage and Christmas presents were flung around as people began to panic. And then, Juliana saw a blinding white light flash out the window on the right wing. It looked like it had exploded one of the engines. A massive bolt of lightning had struck the plane, and suddenly the nose tipped down as the aircraft started to take a dive. Juliana could see everyone below her all the way into the cockpit. People were in chaos as the roar of the turbines overwhelmed her senses. She remembers her mother screaming, "This is the end." In an instant, the screams and the turbines go quiet. Juliana realizes her mother was no longer beside her, and that she was no longer in the plane. She was still strapped in, but the other two seats were empty. It was flying around in the air, spiraling down like a maple leaf. Then she lurched forward as the seat shifted her facing down. The seatbelt gripped her stomach, making it hard to breathe. At this moment, Juliana started to make sense of what was happening, but before the fear could take over, she blacked out and lost consciousness as she fell from 2 miles in the air down into the Amazon rainforest. After many hours, Juliana awoke with remnants of strange dreams. She was lying on the ground, covered in mud and a puddle of rain. The row of seats was above her, tangled in the vines. She gathered that she must have been there all night while the rain poured down. Memories of the fall started to come back to her. She remembered the plane going down and still being strapped to her seat as it flew through the air. She remembered the lush green canopy below her. She remembered her mother's last words. But that was all gone now. The plane was gone, her mother was gone, and Juliana was now alone in the middle of the Amazon jungle, feeling helpless and abandoned. She tried to get up, but her concussion made her weak and dizzy. Her left eye was swollen shut, and she could barely see out of her right eye. Plus, she had lost her glasses, and only had one sandal, and all she had to wear was a short skirt and a shirt. Juliana lay there for a while, unable to stand or even sit up. When she finally was able to sit up, she assessed her injuries. Her right clavicle was broken and overlapping, but the skin was unbroken and there was no pain. She was astonished at the deep gash on her calf, likely caused by a piece of metal, but it wasn't bleeding, and Juliana counted herself lucky for that. She looked around for signs of movement or cries for help, but she was alone. She wanted to find her mother and desperately called out for her while crawling around on the jungle floor. The bond they shared made it inconceivable to Juliana that her mother could be taken from her so abruptly. They had just been beside each other and on their way to reunite with her father, and now she was just gone. But Juliana continued to search the rainforest, hoping to find her mother or other survivors. She came across the wreckage of the plane, scattered about the forest floor, and the only food she was able to find was a bag of candy and a holiday cake, but the cake was covered in mud, so she left it behind. After a few days, Juliana came across a horrific sight. It was another row of 3 seats, but the women that were still strapped in had clearly died instantly as they hit the ground. The seat was stuck deep in the dirt due to the immense force of the impact, and only the legs were sticking out. These were the only people she ever found who were on Flight 508 with her. As Juliana was searching some of the wreckage of the plane, a familiar sound was starting to grow louder in her head. She realized that she had been hearing this noise for a while, but only now was it overwhelming her mind, as if her brain was screaming at her to recognize the sound. It dawned on her that it was water, the trickle of a spring somewhere close by. Juliana followed the sound until she reached the source. It wasn't much, just a slight stream flowing over some rocks into a puddle, but Juliana knew that this was her way to freedom. Her father had taught her well, that a small body of water leads to a larger body of water, like a river, where people are more likely to be found that could help her. As she trudged through the rainforest, the water from the stream was growing deeper and wider, reassuring her that she was moving in the right direction. Juliana pressed on, collecting rainwater on leaves for a source of hydration and carefully rationing her bag of candy. She was determined to keep moving forward, and her lifetime of knowledge and experience in the jungle calmed her fears of the ever-lurking dangers of the Amazon. Juliana was more fortunate than most would be in her situation. The jungle was her home, and she knew how to navigate it well. She was very familiar with a particular species of bird that she had studied, the crested chicken. It had a peculiar call that doesn't sound like other birds, and they are known to make their nests on the branches that hang over the rivers. When Juliana heard their distinct call, she immediately knew that she would be able to find a larger body of water faster by locating these birds. She changed direction and followed the sound of what she calls her avian saviors. As search and rescue attempts were being made, Juliana could hear the planes and helicopters flying overhead. But because of the dense jungle canopy, there was no clear path of impact that could be detected through the trees as they looked for survivors. After a few days, Juliana couldn't hear them anymore and knew that the rescue efforts had been abandoned. Her feelings of desolation and solitude deepened as she realized the fate of her survival depended solely on her alone. Juliana kept pushing forward despite her bleak situation. It didn't take long for her candy supply to run out, and she was unable to find other food. She had no tools to help her hunt or build much of a shelter. She found tree trunks to protect her back and covered herself with large leaves. The mosquitoes were relentless, only letting up when the rains came. But sometimes it would rain all night, and it struck down hard and cold, stinging like needles. Her blanket of leaves was useless as she shivered through sleepless nights, drenched in mud. A wound on her arm began to fester, and she noticed that flies had laid their eggs in her flesh. Maggots were forming and burrowing deep into her skin. Juliana worried that she could get blood poisoning and possibly lose her arm, but there was nothing she could do. The days slowly went by as she waded through the river, sometimes lying on her back and letting the current gently float her downstream. There were many dangers that lurked in the waters, but Juliana's wealth of knowledge gave her safe passage. The caiman alligators were scattered along the river's edge and would immediately splash into the water when she approached, but she knew that they were only scared of her and were swimming away in retreat, unlikely to try and attack her if unprovoked. In the shallow waters, she used a walking stick to check ahead of her for poisonous stingrays that liked to lay in the mud. Juliana confidently conquered the river, knowing if she just kept going, she would eventually find help. Juliana had been drifting downriver for over a week. She was losing her strength and will to carry on as she stopped to sit on a riverbank. It was the 10th day of her difficult journey, and she could barely keep her body moving. She nodded off as she sat there, weak and unable to think clearly. But suddenly, she reawakened by remembering what she had actually seen in front of her before she closed her eyes. It was a boat. She couldn't believe it, but there was a boat right there in front of her. Juliana slowly approached to touch it and see if it was real. She thought that she might be hallucinating, but there really was a boat right in front of her. Now she was wide awake, frantically looking around for the owner of the boat. There was a small path that led away from the riverbank, and she followed it. In her weakened state, the incline of the steps carved into the 9-foot embankment was almost too much for her to overcome. It seemed like it took hours for her to climb her way to the top, which led her to a small hut with an engine on the ground, wrapped in a tarp. There was no one around, but Juliana took shelter in the hut and rested for the night. She lay there for hours, drifting in and out of consciousness throughout the night. But then she heard voices. She crawled out of the hut, relieved to find 3 local lumbermen that were shocked to see her. Juliana was in a terrible state, covered in mud, cuts, and bruises, with severely bloodshot eyes. Juliana spoke to them in Spanish and told them who she was and how she got there. She asked them to help her pour gasoline on her arm to help get rid of the maggots, and then they helped her to their boat to help get her to the nearest hospital. She was taken to an airstrip and flown to Pucallpa, finally reaching the destination she was meant to land in 11 days prior. In the aftermath of a devastating plane crash and the subsequent harrowing days spent alone in the vast and unforgiving Amazon rainforest, Juliana demonstrated an extraordinary depth of knowledge and survival skills, a testament to her upbringing and close bond with her parents. Her familiarity with the jungle, as well as her unwavering spirit to keep moving forward, played pivotal roles in her survival. As we conclude this episode, let Juliane Koepcke's incredible journey serve as a reminder of the inherent strength we all possess and the importance of perseverance in times of adversity. Next time on Wild Survival, we will examine a formidable and often underestimated creature. Despite its misleading portrayal as a gentle giant, we'll reveal the true nature behind this terrifying behemoth that lurks in the rivers of Africa, the hippopotamus. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, explore with caution and thrive with resilience.